today's webinar, Product Updates for SDL Managed Translation. My name is Kate Bradshaw and I will be your host. With the upcoming release of SDL Managed Translation, we're hosting this webinar to introduce the new capabilities, features and improvements. We'll also touch on some of the updates released earlier in 2018 that you might have missed. Your SDL speakers today are Parnell, Product Manager for SDL Managed Translation, and Sorina, Product Owner. We expect today's webinar will last about 35 to 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. I'll now pass you over to Ian to begin the presentation today.
Thank you, Kate, and welcome to everybody that's joined for the webinar today. Let me start by giving you a quick rundown of the agenda and the topics that we would like to cover with you today. So we will start by going through some of the focus areas for SDL Managed Translation. We will then look back over the previous 12 months at some of the features that we have delivered in the product. We will provide an overview, so some more of the detail around those features that we've recently released, and we will also provide you with a demonstration of a couple of the more recent features that have gone live in Managed Translation. We will give you an overview of our roadmap for the remainder of this year, so you can get some insight into the features that we are actively working on and we plan to work on during the course of this year. And then at the end of the webinar, we will open up to any questions that the audience have following today's session. So if we just look through some of the focus areas that we have on Managed Translation. So user experience is something that we attach a lot of importance to for Managed Translation. We have a team that's dedicated to user experience that works very closely with our engineering teams. We want to make sure that the user interface, the user experience that we provide to our users is as close to perfection as we can possibly make it. So the approach we take is very painstaking, and wherever possible we try to ensure that we're validating the designs and prototypes with real customers that are actually using our software. So some of the features that we'll be going through in more detail later on during the webinar, we've actually gone out to customers during the design process. We've given them some of the prototypes to work with and got their feedback as to whether or not they feel we've implemented that in the best possible way. So as I say, this is really important to us. Integrations also, we understand that a lot of the people that are using our products, they work primarily in other systems. So getting content out and back in to those systems it has to work very efficiently. We need to streamline the process for content coming into Mantra for localization and then back into the underlying content repository. Convergence is a topic and has been a topic that we have put a lot of focus on over the past year and more. So what this really means, and we'll go into some of the specifics around this in the next slide, what SDL are looking to do across our technology products is streamline into a single offering and capability. So rather than build out capabilities in multiple products in different ways, what we're trying to do is build out a single capability and then expose that through multiple products. Again, there are a couple of real examples of how we have recently delivered on that convergence track that we'll talk through in more detail later on in the webinar. Security is obviously of paramount importance to us at SDL. We went to great lengths to achieve our ISO 27001 certification quite recently. GDPR is clearly a topic that has been in the news, I'm sure. Excuse me. Most, if not all, of the people on the webinar today have in some way been touched by the GDPR guidelines that are about to go into effect later on this month. So we want to make sure that managed translation complies with all of the guidelines that are being recommended by GDPR. And then finally, again, something that we attach great importance to is customer satisfaction. So we're quite lucky in a sense with managed translation in that we don't really have any technical debt from legacy products. It's only something that we've started developing quite recently. Touch wood, we get very few technical issues and defects that are being reported in the product. So all that means is that we can put a lot of our resource into building and developing new features that our customers are asking for. So again, pretty much all of the features that we have delivered over the past year and will continue to deliver throughout the remainder of this year, they've in some way been recommended or requested to us by our actual customer base. So I think it's very important that we're able to do that. So just kind of touching in a little bit more detail on the convergence theme that I mentioned in the previous slide. So this is essentially a mechanism that is allowing SDL to focus all of our innovation and development in one particular place. So the examples that you see listed in here, like the online editor, which is something that we released very recently in managed translation. We want one online editor that we can focus on across all of our products. So instead of developing product-specific capabilities and then having to obviously continue to develop new features within those specific products, we develop that once within this converged capability, and that can then be exposed through the various products where that's appropriate. So online editor, as I say, is a very recent example of where all of the kind of the work we've been doing around this has started to come to fruition. The others that you see listed in here, terminology, as you will learn more about later today, is something that we are currently working on. Coming slightly later will be a standardized translation memory format, filters, projects capability, and machine translation. These are all examples of where we're looking to converge within a single offering, a single component, as I say, that can be leveraged and exposed through the different products within our technology portfolio. So if we take a look now at the features that we have delivered in managed translation over the previous 12 months. Now I'm going to focus more so on the more recent releases, clearly, that will be of more interest to the people that are on this call. So in the 18.4 release that shipped in April, there were two main features that were included in that release, those being a single sign-on capability and an integration with the SDL online editor, so our converged online editing capability that I referred to earlier on in the webinar. We're going to take a look in more detail at both of those features. So we have Sorina on the call, who is the product owner of managed translation. She's prepared a short video around those two features to walk through those with you in a little bit more detail and some of the accompanying features that are part of those capabilities. For some of the other features that you see listed in here under the 18.2 releases, so the translation memory search, and in the 17.12 release, the project templates functionality, I have some separate slides where we can talk in much more detail around those. So I'm not going to dwell too much on this slide. So if we talk initially about the online editor, as I say, we're going to have a demo of this a little later in the webinar with Sorina, but what we have implemented here is a feature-rich online editor with the intention of supporting a switch to an online way of working. Now that's primarily focused around the translator persona. So historically, translators have typically always preferred to work in an offline CAT tool, Studio being SDL's example. Now we're starting to see a growing shift in translators that are becoming more open to the possibility of working in an online environment. That's not to say that there isn't still a very real use case and a requirement for desktop tools. I think that will always be the case. But in certain circumstances and scenarios, what we're finding is translators, it's simpler and it can be quicker for them to log into an online editor, perform their translation or finalize the translation of certain content and submit forward on to the next step in a localization workflow. So we've tried to build in a feature set in the online editor that's befitting of what a translator might be familiar with in an offline CAT tool. And the screenshot that I've included in here is the user experience that a translator would see. So across the ribbon bar along the top of the browser window in here, you'll see there are some fairly sophisticated and advanced features that we've included for translators to aid them in their work. Now, we understand that the user interface that different personas may want to see it won't always be the same. So if you have a reviewer, for example, that wants to work within an online editor, then the features that a reviewer might need to see are very different to what a translator needs to see. They need to focus their attentions on providing feedback, perhaps implementing very minor changes to the translation of the segment. So the UI of the online editor is something that we want to make sure is very adaptable and offers the appropriate user experience according to the person who is working within that online editor. The single sign-on feature is also something that was included in the April release of Managed Translation that went live a couple of weeks ago now. So again, what we have intended to do here is allow users to access various SDL products, services, capabilities with a single identity, a single account. So once a user has logged in to Managed Translation, for example, they may want to go out and browse our SDL community. They may need to raise a support ticket in our gateway solution. Rather than have to log in with different credentials for each of those systems and products, we're allowing user now to log in with the same account. So the same set of credentials. Once you're logged into one system, you will automatically be logged into other products and services where this single sign-on SDL ID capability has been released. So later this week, users of Managed Translation will notice a slight change to the login page. And you'll see in the screenshot here, we will now include a second login option for users that have linked their account with an SDL identity. Now, although this feature is something that we will enable later this week, as I say, there will not be any immediate change for users of Managed Translation. So SDL ID is something that we will be rolling out on an incremental basis. So we will be contacting users and customers as and when we are about to enable the SDL ID functionality for their particular environment. So we will contact you about this. Until then, you don't need to change the way that you're logging in to manage translation. You would continue to do so in the same way with your current credentials. Project templates is the next recent feature that I wanted to go through in a little bit more detail. So in terms of the implications, the changes to the project creation process, it was a relatively small change, but the impact that this has on users and the feedback that we've been getting from our users is this has had a really significant impact on how they are working with managed translation. So the intention with a template is that it allows users to save common project settings, and for subsequent projects, instead of having to create that project from scratch, so re-entering all of the various fields and settings, they can call on a project template that they've created previously. All of the fields stored within that template will automatically be populated, and obviously that will greatly reduce the amount of time it takes to create new projects. Now, that isn't the only benefit, although that is the obvious benefit, reducing the amount of time it takes to create new projects. There are other benefits, of course, because if we have all of these settings stored within a template, then when you come to create new projects with that template, it reduces the risk of error during project creation. So we have some customers that localize into upwards of 30 languages. Now, for users that are required to manually select each of those 30 languages when they create a project, there's obviously a real risk of human error in somebody missing out one of the languages or perhaps selecting the wrong languages. But in having all of these stored within a template, it just means they have to select the appropriate template during project creation, and all of those languages are automatically populated. Now, to give you an example of how this feature is displayed within the project creation form, as you'll see, the impact this has had on the UI is pretty minimal. It's a new field that you're now able to select from during the project creation process. Now, what we understand about a lot of our user base, the localization of their content is not the primary task that they're asked to work on. So speaking from personal experience as the product manager on managed translation, we localize our user interface, we localize our documentation. It's generally one of the last things that we tend to get to as part of the release process. You know, we make sure all of our features have been developed and tested, and then we get to the point where we need to go and make sure we've localized all of our new or updated strings within the UI. Now, our customers are using managed translation in the same way. So they would typically only touch managed translation for various parts of the day. It's not something that the customer lives in on an ongoing basis. So to that extent, we need to make sure that the user experience is as optimal as we can possibly make it. We understand that a user just wants to log into managed translation, submit their localization project, make sure that that's all been initiated correctly, and then go back to doing their primary roles. So when designing the user experience and when designing these new features, we have to take all of that into account. The TM search feature, again, is something that we have released quite recently. This is intended to provide users with much more insight into their translation memory content. So I think that the feedback that we've had from users in the past is that although they're obviously benefiting and leveraging from their translation memories, it's difficult for them to exactly know what's actually contained within their translation memories. It was almost like a translation memory was a black box for them. They were getting the benefit of it, but they didn't really have that level of visibility or control into what was contained within their translation memory. So what we've tried to do here, as I say, is provide users with that ability to go in and perform a basic search against their TM. So that might be in order to search for a single phrase or a string within their TM, within a source language. It may be to allow them to respond to queries that have been raised by in-country teams who are perhaps questioning whether a certain string is present in their translation memory. So again, this is something that went live in February this year. Again, the feedback that we've had from our customer base has been very positive with this. And again, just to follow that up with a visual of how the TM search page is presented within the Managed Translation UI. In keeping with Managed Translation as a whole, we've tried to keep this as simple as we possibly can. So if we do have people who aren't linguistic, that they may not necessarily be localization experts, we still wanted them to be able to benefit from this feature if they wish to. So just very quickly kind of explain the various elements of this page. On the left-hand side is where a user would enter their search parameters, so they would specify the string that they're interested in searching for. They're able to choose whether they want to perform a simple TM lookup or perhaps run a concordant search for a particular word or string. The project option is a familiar concept for users of Managed Translation. So this is what defines how a project is handled, and including the definition of which translation memories are applied as part of a project being processed. So we've taken that concept into the TM search page, as it's something that should be all too familiar with our users. So when performing a search, a user would specify what project option they want to search within, and then we would, or Managed Translation, would look within all of the translation memories that are configured as part of that project option and make them available in the search results. Now clearly a user would need to specify what source and target languages they're interested in performing a search for. They can specify the minimum match percentage that they're interested in, so what level of quality match they would like to see the results for, and then also how extensive they would like the search to be performed, so how many results would they like to see for each of the languages that they have selected. So a user would enter all their parameters from the left of the screen, and then the results of their search are then displayed in the remainder of the page. So for each result, we display where that match was found, the actual source and target content that's present in the TM, the match percentage, any difference between the search string and the actual result that was found in the TM, and then any penalties that were applied. And for each of these results, you'll see for the first in this example in here, the user is able to expand the results to see more information about that particular match that was found in the TM. So they can see very easily when it was created, how many times that segment has been used for projects that have been processed through Managed Translation, when it was last updated, and so on. So there's quite a lot of information available in this page within this feature, but we've tried to ensure that it is presented in quite a simplistic way, so users can easily understand how to go in and work with this feature. So at this point we will move on to a demonstration of the SDL ID, the single sign-on, and SDL online editor features that were released recently, so in the April release of Managed Translation. So at this point I will hand over to Sorina, who will walk you through a demo of these two features.
Thank you, Ian. I will present you a round-trip demo of the SDL ID and online editor integration into SDL Managed Translation. You can see on my screen a document that I am planning to translate and review using SDL Managed Translation. This document is a photo printer manual, which I will review using SDL Managed Translation. I will log into my system using an SDL ID account. My user is an SDL federated user, so I can log in using Windows authentication. I am now logged in. I will create a project with the document I've presented before, uploading the file, the photo printer manual, and create project. The project has been created, and I will be able to see it as ready for approval. I will approve my project, and once approved, it will get to the review stage and it will be assigned to a reviewer. I will log in now as a reviewer, which is also an SDL ID. I won't use the Windows authentication. I will log in with SDL ID by entering my username and password. And I am now logged into SDL Managed Translation as a reviewer. Under Files for Review section, I should have the project available. And clicking on the row, I will be able to open the document in the online editor. As you can see, I am automatically logged in as I'm using the SDL ID identity. And inside the online editor, I am able to edit the translation. I can confirm or reject a segment. Once confirmed, this is marked as confirmed. I have also the possibility to filter my segments. So if I have a lot of them, I can filter, for example, after translation approved segments, and it will return me only those with this status. Also, the online editor offers the possibility to perform TM translation memory lookups. So I have a translation memory assigned to my project. I will unlock the segment and I will perform a lookup for a specific segment in my translation memory. I have some translations available, and I will be able to apply the translation that is returned from the TM. Also, as you can see below, the online editor also offers the possibility of using terminology. So I can perform terminology lookup on specific terms, like photo printer in this case. Another great functionality for reviewers, and not only reviewers, are the comments which can be added for the segments. Comments can be added with different severity level, information, warning, or errors. I have now added a comment as an information to my segment. I would like to add that all the changes done as a reviewer can be tracked in the online editor. Once the reviewer was done, I can either submit the project or reject it. I have now submitted my project, and I am back into Mantra with logged in as a project manager, and I should be able to see now the project as ready for download. I have the possibility here to download the project with or without the source file. And after download, the project can be marked as complete. Project completed. This was my demo. Thank you.
Thank you, Sorina. Looks really good. Thank you. Okay, so if we now kind of look into the future, we're going to talk in a little bit more detail on some of the features that we are currently working on and those that we plan to implement later on during the course of this year. So at a high level, this is our roadmap for 2018. So clearly we have delivered on all of the features that were committed for Q1 this year. We are currently working on the features that you see listed in Q2. So I'm going to talk in more detail on some of these in subsequent slides. So I will just pick out a couple from this roadmap to talk around at a high level. So later on in Q2, we will be implementing what we call scope filtering within managed translation. So what this means is for users that perhaps have overarching visibility of multiple departments, multiple groups of users within managed translation. At the moment when they log into the system, they are only able to see all the projects across all of those sub-teams and departments. So it makes it a little difficult for those users to be able to kind of go in and see exactly what those individual teams are working on. So the obvious example being a manager that has responsibility of a marketing team and a technical publications team. So with scope filtering, what this will allow a user to do is choose within those sub-teams as to which they want to focus on at any one moment in time. So if they only wanted to take a look at what the marketing team were working on, then they could select that option from a pick list, and then all of the contents within their dashboard and within their project summaries would be limited to only the projects and the data that was relevant to that marketing team. So it's, in summary, it's allowing users to zoom in to specific areas of content and users within managed translation. Later on this year in Q3, we will be releasing a quality capability within the SDL online editor that Sorina demoed a little earlier. So as part of the review of a task, a reviewer will be able to provide feedback using a TQA model, so Translation Quality Assessment model, as part of their review. Now, these models can be defined according to a customer's requirements, so there may be certain types of metrics and levels of grading that a customer wants to be able to track as part of their review, and the interface within the online editor will be adapted according to that model, so a reviewer can provide feedback as and when they're reviewing the document. Now, clearly all of that data will then be fed back into the central system, so it will be available for reporting as a customer sees fit. Also in Q3, we are looking to provide more flexibility in terms of how users can make changes to in-progress projects. So the examples that I've kind of listed in here are, again, the obvious ones. So after creating a project, from time to time, a customer might realize that they have an additional document that they actually want to translate as part of the same project. They may decide that they want to translate a project into additional languages. So at the moment, the implications are that user would have to either delete the project and start again, or they would need to create a new project with the delta from the initial project, but that implies that there are two projects then that the user would need to track. So this feature will allow users to make those types of changes to projects that are already in flight up until a certain point within the localization workflow. Towards the end of this year, we will be working on a new inbox, a new dashboard for LSP project managers. that receive projects through the Managed Translation interface. So those project managers can log into Managed Translation, see an overview of all the projects that they have been asked to work on, and clearly track the status of those projects all through the Managed Translation interface. And then finally, in Q4, we will be releasing our initial version of in-context review within Managed Translation. So obviously the later we go into this year, the details, or the exact details of how this will be implemented are not quite as clear-cut. But this is something that we will be putting a lot of focus on, the ability for reviewers to be able to work from a review interface that is specific to how they prefer to work. So rather than working from a bilingual interface with source and target, it's perhaps more appropriate for reviewers to actually be presented with the translated document in the context of the application or the format in which that was contained. So they're mostly focused on reviewing the final document, and then if they need to make changes or provide feedback on any of the translations within that document, then they can drill into a particular area of the document and go in and make the changes or make the suggestions to that. The main focus of the interface is on the translated document. So that, again, will be something that will be coming later on in 2018. A couple of the features in our roadmap that I didn't go into any detail on that I will now talk about a little more. Cloud terminology. So this forms part of the convergence strategy that I mentioned earlier. So cloud terminology will become SDL's terminology offering that we will start to integrate and incorporate across our product portfolio. So that will start with Managed Translation for our enterprise customer base. What we're looking to do here is really offer customers an integrated experience. So we don't want users to have to log in and out of different products depending on what information or what task they're looking to perform. We want all of this to be centralized within a single user interface across the supply chain. So from the point of actually managing your terminology, so importing term bases, going in and performing a search, updating, deleting terms, we want users to be able to do that through the same user interface as what they're familiar with in Managed Translation. And to give you a preview of how this will look and feel within the Managed Translation interface, we've included this screenshot in here. So again, the emphasis here is in offering users a seamless integration, regardless of who they are or what tasks they need to perform. The user experience is consistent. We don't want users to have to learn different products according to what it is that they need to do. It should all be intuitive. It should all be contained within a single product offering. Another feature that I wanted to just go into a little bit more of the detail on is what we are calling product broadcasts. So what we're looking to implement here is a communication channel, essentially, but all self-contained within the product. So in doing this feature, we want to be able to raise awareness of product updates that we are putting into production, new features, perhaps providing more details on some of the new features that we have released in Managed Translation, but again, all done through the product itself. So rather than requiring users to go in and receive information via the community, which of course customers are still more than welcome to do, we just feel it's appropriate that we provide certain pieces of information through the user interface itself. So it opens up this communication channel with much more of our user base, and we're providing users with the information that they think they would be interested in. And again, here's a mock-up, a visual of how product broadcasts will be displayed for users. Again, whilst wanting to make sure that users are kept informed and notified about product updates and new features, we didn't want to make this feature too intrusive in terms of how a user works with managed translation. So it's been implemented in quite a subtle way. We're limiting the amount of information that we make available through this feature, but we are providing links. So for users that do want to get more information on individual releases and features, there will be links that will take them into the community or into our documentation where they can learn even more about these features that we're releasing. And just on the topic of the community, I just wanted to say a few words about this and promote this to the people on this webinar as much as possible. The community is growing in popularity and has been now for a good 6 months to a year. So from the community, we provide customers with information on our product releases and product roadmap. We also, I mentioned earlier on in the webinar about how we have been talking to a lot of our customer base in the development and design process for new features. So this is something that we would always initiate through the community. So we might post an announcement or a request for customers that are interested in a particular area of the product or a particular feature. We would then work with them directly to go through mock-ups, prototypes for the features that we're working on, get their feedback, and then make sure that we obviously incorporate that into the final feature that we release. So again, if we have anybody on the call who would be interested in participating in that type of program, then I would encourage you to register for our community. And we also have a growing library of video content within the community that's published from our YouTube channel. So these videos are primarily feature demos that we try and keep quite short in length, so they're typically between 1 and 2 minutes, that they give you a useful intro and walkthrough of how those features worked and what it is that we've intended to make available to our customer base. We also have some slightly longer videos that are also available on the community, so product walkthroughs, more extensive demos of the product. So as I say, I would certainly encourage all of the people on this call to register for the community if you haven't already, and make use of some of the content that we are publishing from that community site.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ian and Sorina. Just before we close the webinar today, just wanted to bring up this slide and just say, obviously that we're sure you're all very aware, but as with sort of all our product roadmap and strategy sessions, today's presentation is intended to be a general outline and is for information purposes only, and it isn't a commitment as such to deliver any features or functionality. So with that boring bit out of the way, I think we have time for 1 or 2 very, very quick questions, and then we'll close up today. So I'll jump straight in with the following question, which is, can I use SDL ID with my existing Active Directory?
Yes, we can federate your existing Active Directory of or LDAP with SDL ID.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Sorina. And another question that's come in, do you have any plans to sunset the current online editing environments in SDL TMS or SDL Managed Translation?
So this isn't something that we are planning to do imminently, Kate. So clearly the online editor that we've recently released, we expect to see a lot of interest in that and uptake from users. We still see scenarios where users, depending on their role, may prefer to work in a simpler, dare I say, interface. So the reviewer persona, for example, where they may not have a requirement to go in and make changes to a translator segment directly. They may just prefer to go in and add comments that can then be incorporated by a linguist at a subsequent workflow step. So at the moment we see value in having both options available, but ultimately we will be migrating users across to the online editor as we start to make that editor a little more adaptable according to the persona and flexible in terms of what functions are available and so on. So for now, no plans to end of life any of the current online editing environments, but clearly we will be promoting the SDL on editor and moving people towards that as much as possible.
Okay. Great stuff, Ian. Thank you very much. I will now wrap up the webinar. So thank you very much to everyone who attended. And if anyone had posted questions and we didn't get to them, we will of course get back to you. We hope you found today's session useful and informative, and we'll share this recording with you shortly after today. So have a great rest of the day, and thank you very much to everyone that attended.